We'll be working with a number of props in this floor work section. Don't worry if you don't have the props that I have. You can make do with what you have. So if you don't have a bolster, gather together pillows and blankets, even. You'll need an extra rolled mat in and of itself. Even towels will do. If you have an eye pillow and blocks, gather those up as well. Have everything nearby. If you don't have blocks, you can use books or towels or blankets instead. And if you don't have an eye pillow, you can use a scarf, something that you can put over your eyes to release into the darkness. Step onto your mat at about the middle, coming into child pose, facing off the short end of the mat. Press your hips back over your heels. Use your hands in front in extended child pose to help you tuck in small. Feel free to take your knees wider if that's more comfortable. And when you find your low back is long, your hips are comfortable, then find where you can release your head, either resting it on the ground, or if it doesn't touch the ground, maybe stacking your hands or your fists under your head, or if you have a block or a pillow handy, use that. If your hands are not under your head, then you might want to wrap them back around by your feet. This is a draping practice where you're learning how to let go and allow the body to be more fluid. So the props underneath the body give you a sense of draping over a surface. You want to make sure that you take time to find where you can release comfortably, where the breath can happen. It's not an effort to be there. So you might find that there's a little bit more foo-stirring around with this practice, getting yourself oriented, and then a lot more time being there. So the bottom line is, take your time. This next time that you inhale, uncurl to come up to kneeling, bringing your arms out to the sides, up overhead, bring your palms together, draw them down along the midline of your body as you exhale, bringing your hands, your thumbs towards your sternum, reminding the sternum to lift up, to open space for the lungs. Now that you're upright and you don't have the front body closed off by the thighs, see if you can breathe a little bit more into your belly and your ribs and up into your collarbones. We'll tune in with the Adi mantra, Om Namo Gurudev Namo, finding your comfort level with that, either joining in with your voice or taking it in internally. If you're joining in, breathe in for the first of 3. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. As you inhale, lift your arms up overhead, exhale, release them out, and then bring your knees wider towards the edges of the mat and bring your bolster in front of you. You're going to bring it right underneath your belly. If you have a graded bolster, take the larger end so it's under your belly, and that'll give you an incline so your head's a little bit lower. If you don't have a graded bolster, just stack an extra blanket on the end that's closest to you. As you settle yourself down over the bolster, make sure that your leg joints are comfortable. So your ankles and knees and hips, do you need to adjust where your feet or your knees are? And then bring your arms out a little bit and push the floor away with your hands to take your hips back. So once you get settled in here, then bring your arms to drape over your knees. letting your shoulders drop forward. If you need to make any adjustments throughout this practice to be more comfortable, to be able to release more fully, do that, and then focus on letting go where you are. So you settle into stillness, similarly to how you do with Shavasana. Noticing how the different alignments, when you allow yourself to let go to the extent that you do in Shavasana, how those different alignments feel. If you can keep your head relaxed as you bring your hands underneath your shoulders again, and use your hands pressing the floor away to lift your head up away from the bolster and change the side that you're resting on, the side of your head that you're resting on. Notice how this feels. Since you didn't choose this side initially, you might find that it feels more awkward in your neck. Can you let go into that awkwardness? You might need to take a breath or so into what you feel before you then release the breath and allow it to simply happen. So you are breathed. Each time you settle into an alignment, allow gravity to take the weight of your body and the breath to happen. Give this side of your neck one more breath to be present with. Your muscles may have released, so see if you can allow them to remain relaxed and isolate the action needed to come out. So pushing the ground away with your hands, let your head stay relaxed. Uncurl your way back up to kneeling. Keep the bolster in front of you and shift your way forward onto hands and knees. So you may need to help your knees back in. Set your belly on the very edge of the roll so that your pubic bones are off the edge and you can feel that edge of the roll into your low belly. Just like we did in the supported child pose, find where your head rests initially, whichever side you want to start with. I'm going to work with the bulk of the roll, dropping the weight of the body over that and feeling the stimulation that comes from breathing deep into the belly and allowing on the exhale the belly and the torso to drape more heavily over the roll. If you have any issues with this one, that's going to really stimulate the internal organs, the reproductive and digestive organs. Feel free to extend the resting child pose, the supported child pose that we just did. If you're comfortable moving into this next one, it's as though the roll is going to imprint into your belly. Check to be sure as you're coming into this that your knees are okay. You may need to roll your ankles out, your knees in, or curl your toes under if you have issues with your knees. Support them as you need. And then also find where your arms are going to be most comfortable. So they may be out to the sides, palms down, with a right angle at the elbows, or you might just relax them by your sides and let your shoulders roll forward as you do with child. And with this practice, work with an active breath, an active belly breath into the roll. Contact that sensation of the bulk of the roll in your belly. I'm going to keep everything and just change the head. So use your arms to create that transition. See if you can stay relaxed in the upper body. Bring your hands underneath your shoulders. Push the ground away with your hands, keeping your head heavy. As you move your head to the other side, notice again how that feels. If it feels a little bit more awkward, maybe take a breath or so into that awkward place. Use your exhale to release. Feel for releasing evenly over the roll on either side of your midline of your spine. So notice if you feel like you're sliding off to one side. Adjust so you feel more centered. Breathe a little bit more actively. Relax your arms, whether they're out to the sides or long by your sides. Feel the side edges of you draping, hips and shoulders, draping over the curve of the roll. As with all of our practices, if you find any tension, any holding in your teeth or your tongue, that's a sign to adjust so that you can release that tension and be present with where you are. After a few moments, I'll bring you back out with my voice. Give yourself one more breath here into your belly. As you exhale, bring your hands underneath your shoulders again and push off to one side, roll off to one side, and then slowly bring yourself back up onto hands and knees. Once you're up on hands and knees, take your bolster and turn it so that the larger end, if you have a larger end, is on the left side and it's crossways to your mat. And then bring your right hip alongside that larger end and drape your right ribs over that larger end. And check to see when you lengthen your legs out and you take your right arm up above your head, so your whole body is long now and your ribs are draped over the roll, whether or not that's breathable. If that's not working and your right shoulder is not on the ground, then you might need to shift towards the smaller end or even work with a smaller roll. It's important, as always, that you can release into this. If you can't, adjust it. So once you find where you can drape your ribs over the roll and still have your right shoulder on the floor and your right hip on the floor, then bend your knees a little bit and adjust where your knees and your feet are so that you feel balanced. You're not going to wobble off your side body, and your low back, particularly your sacrum, feels safe. Once you're stabilized there, then bring your left hand, which was in front of you, helping you to keep your balance, up overhead. So your arms are alongside your ears, and notice if you've lost the opening at the front of your throat. If your chin is tucked down towards your chest, shift your head back and align your arms and your ears. And take a moment here as your left arm comes up overhead to feel for that opening in the left side of your body, how the roll underneath you on the right is shifting your rib cage up and opening the left ribs, the diaphragm muscle there at the base of the ribs. And take a breath or so into it. Feel the inhale expands you, lifts you away from the ground, away from the roll. And the exhale, see if you can drape more deeply over it. What can you let go of that will give you more release towards the earth? Noticing any opening in the left shoulder with your left arm up overhead. Somewhere in the next breath or so, take your left arm back behind you and feel for how that opens the front of the left shoulder into the pectoral muscle, into the chest, into the ribs and the waist. And to accentuate that and expand that down into the hip and the leg, take your left leg forward and feel for a stretch, a reach between your left fingers reaching back behind you and your left toes stretching down and out away from your head. Give that an active breath, a locational breath. Breathe into the open left side. As you exhale next, release back. Let your upper back drape back as though you're following the pull of that left hand and arm behind you. Find where the roll is under the back door of your heart, under your upper back, just below your shoulder blades. And be sure here, as you let your left leg release and your whole body drop down, that you're able to breathe. If this is too tight, if the roll feels like it's too much underneath your upper back, then shift to a smaller section of the roll or go back to your side. Each exhale, allow your body to soften, to drape more over the roll. To transition out of this with minimal effort, bend your left knee, bring your left foot onto the ground, and lead back to your right side with your left knee and your left arm coming around in front of you. Once you have your left hand in front of you and you're on your right side, push the ground away with your hands, keeping your head relaxed. And take your time to slowly press the floor away and come back up to table. Once you're in table, the roll is still in front of you on the mat, then take a breath or so in cat and cow and feel what you've just done. Feel how you've only done one side. The next time you inhale, flip the roll around. You may need to fluff it back up if it's gotten compressed. So you now have the larger end on the right side. You're going to bring your left hip down and drape your left rib cage over that larger end of the roll. And check that you can rest your left shoulder on the ground. So if the roll feels like it's too much, it's propping you up too much, shift to a smaller end or a smaller roll. Lengthen out initially. Find where your feet, knees, hips, shoulders, head, and left hand are all in line. And then find your balance by bending your knees, adjusting where your knees and your feet are so that you don't have to worry about balance. You can fully focus on draping, on releasing into the pull of gravity. And once you're settled there, take your right arm up overhead. Again, notice if your chin is dropped down towards your chest. You may need to shift your head back a little bit and feel for aligning your arms with your ears. Take a few breaths through this active stretch. So you're actively reaching out, opening through your shoulder and ribs and section of the diaphragm on that side. Feeling the compression on the left side, the underside with the roll. Breathing into what you're feeling. This next time that you inhale, take your right arm up and back behind you, reaching up away from your head and back behind you until you feel the stretch in your right shoulder and upper chest muscles, and finding the length through your right elbow and your fingers that extends that stretch down into your ribs and your waist, to extend it all the way down into your right leg. Extend your right leg forward and down. So feel for that long line from your right fingers to your right toes, and breathe into the space that you're creating on that right side. And then begin to let your body relax more so that your right arm is hanging back with the pull of gravity. You're not holding it, you're not reaching it. You may need to change the angle of it so that works for your shoulder joint. And then allow your body to follow gravity's pull as it's pulling your right arm down. Let your right upper back drop down over the roll and your torso open so your front body is facing the sky. Reset your right leg. You're still going to have a bit more space on the right side. You won't be fully symmetrical here, but find where you're comfortable, where you can allow your right hip and leg to rest on the ground, your shoulder blades and arms and head resting on the ground, and that space behind your heart in your upper back is draped over the roll. So adjust if you need to so that you can fully release over whatever's underneath you. You might need to give that a couple of active breaths so that you can be in the sensation of opening the back door of the heart, expanding your breath into the sensation there as you inhale, and then letting go of what's holding as you exhale. After a couple of active breaths, then see if you're able to let go of the breath and soften even more. To transition out of this with minimal effort so you retain the space that you've opened into, bend your right knee and use that right foot on the ground to help you shift to the left. Use your right arm as it lifts up and over to transition your torso so you're rolling onto your left side, and push the ground away with your right hand. Find the action in your right arm. Head stays heavy. Can you isolate in that right arm? Once you have your left hand underneath you as well, use both hands to help you shift so that you're back up on hands and knees. Minimal effort to get there. Checking again in cat and cow. What have you done? Where have you been? What feels good? Use cat and cow as a way of reassessing the effect of those last two movements and openings. I'm going to transition from working with the bolster or the roll to the rolled mat. So it's a smaller roll to work with. And we'll continue with that focus at the back door of the heart, and bring your rolled mat onto your main mat so that it's crossways. Bring yourself from table, once you've set your mat, onto your back and settle your upper back just below your shoulder blades onto the rolled mat. You can always uncurl the mat if you need less height, if it feels like it's too bulky underneath your upper back and you're not able to breathe. Start out with your knees bent, your feet on the ground, feet pigeon-toed. Feel for your sacrum resting easily on the ground and your shoulder blades, the upper shoulders on the ground, not the bottom tips of your shoulder blades. And then you may prefer to remain with your knees bent and dropped in towards each other, if that feels better on your low back. If it works for you to release your legs long and doesn't strain your low back, then lengthen out. Take your arms out to the sides. Turn your palms up. Notice any difference in how your arms and your shoulders connect to the ground, left to right. And also notice any differences in how your sacrum connects to the ground. However your legs are, notice your sacrum. As with all of these practices, we start out with a few active breaths to feel for where you are and how you are in where you are. And then let the breath settle, so you become more adept at shifting from conscious active breathing to passive, relaxed breathing. So as you let go of your breath, notice if there's anything else you can let go of in your body. Are there any small, subtle areas that are holding tight? If your knees are bent, you might find that you're holding in your groins, in your pelvis. Can you let the legs drop in towards each other? We're going to transition here from having the rolled mat underneath your upper back to having it underneath your sacrum. So if your legs are long, bend your knees, push the ground away with your feet once you have them underneath your knees, so that you can slowly and easily lift your sacrum, your low back up off the ground, lifting up enough that you can shift the rolled mat down. Hopefully it hasn't stuck and you can make that shift relatively easily. Going to move it down underneath your sacrum. So play here for a moment to find where that is. You want to feel where you're just above the flesh of the butt cheeks and not so high up that you're feeling pressure on the low back where the spine has no other bony structures the way that it does with the ribs and the pelvis. Feel for where you're more underneath your pelvis. Once you find that place, bring your legs up into the air and let the weight of your legs sink down through your pelvis, sink down into the rolled mat. You can bring your feet back down and readjust as you need to. Find the right place. And then let your legs be relaxed. Once they're up in the air, there'll be a little bend in your knees, feet relaxed, arms are out to the sides, palms up. Feel your upper back is now resting more evenly left to right on the ground. Now that you have yourself in the right place, shake your legs loose. I find the easiest way to get some release through the hips, through the pelvis, is to take the knees side to side. So see if you can lead with your knees, but play around with it. Find where it feels good. Take a shake through your legs. And once you've had a breath or so there, shaking them free, shaking off any heaviness in your legs, then bring them back to hanging easily in the air. So again, it's a slight bend in the knees. Feel for a place where your legs are not requiring any engagement, any energy to stay upright. You might like to remain with the rolled mat. It's a bit softer and lower down. If you are feeling ready to shift into a slightly more solid surface that's a little bit higher, then transition to your block. So you're going to bring your feet back down to the ground. If you're making that transition, push the ground away with your feet, lift your pelvis up. And then if you're working with the block, find the height that will work for you. So it's either the broadest surface or the second highest height. Don't go for the highest just yet. I'm going to come back into that same posture. This is a really great way to release the fluid from the legs, to rejuvenate the heart. It's a slight inversion. Just like with the roll, especially with this harder surface of the block, you want to find where your sacrum feels safe, your low back feels safe. Once you have your sacrum settled, if it works for you, as you lengthen your legs up in an easy way into the air, lengthen your arms up overhead, also in an easy way. Notice how your shoulders feel, how your shoulders, elbows, and hands connect to the ground, and any sensations that you have left to right that feel different in those joints. If there's something that you're working with, you are giving it a few extra active breaths and then playing with letting the breath go, letting your body be where it is. And if you feel comfortable moving on to our last posture with this block, great. Feel free to stay with the rolled mat if that's the best choice, the wisest choice for you. So as you bring your feet down, push the ground away, same transition, lift your pelvis up. Find the height that's going to work for you by shifting the block so it's at either its mid-height or its highest height underneath the sacrum. Feel free to cushion it with a towel or a blanket if it feels too hard at this height. Take a glance up and see that your knees are in line with your front hips. Get a sense that your feet are underneath your knees, parallel to each other, more than in a V shape if possible. And once you've created your alignment and let your weight settle over the block, then let your arms come to rest down by your sides. If you want to play a little bit with opening the heart space as we do in a more engaged bridge, turn your palms up and let your outer shoulders drop down. To bring yourself out of this with the same awareness that you've transitioned through all of these roll and block postures, push your feet into the ground to shift your pelvis up. Bring the block out from underneath your pelvis and take your time to roll your spine down. Either rest with your knees bent and dropped in towards each other, or in full Shavasana. Find the place that feels the most released for you, particularly in your sacrum and your low back. If you have blankets and eye pillows, gather them up, set yourself up for resting warmly, where your eyes can go inwards, your vision can draw inwards. Allow yourself to settle into spaciousness and stillness and silence for a few moments. After a few moments, I'll bring you back out with my voice. And as you reconnect with movement from the inside out, from the breath into the body, extend that into your body, taking whatever stretches, lengthwise, crosswise, that feel good for you, moving slowly from your center outwards, from your breath outwards. As you breathe, lengthen, stretch long. When you feel ready, either roll to your side or tuck in and massage your back. Be conscious in your transition, taking your time to emerge from your resting place, coming back upright as you're ready. Bringing your arms up, bring your palms together, gather up whatever sort of energy you'd like to carry with you off the mat. Acknowledging yourself in your practice. If you're practicing with anyone else, acknowledging them as well. Namaste.